And we're setting up. All right. Welcome to all of my Goddess Garden guests and all the members of the book club. And I want to welcome our guest today, Mr. Tom Nickel, PhD. He's the author of Murder in the Metaverse, along with several other fascinating projects that we're going to dip into. But I first want to say thank you so much for joining the podcast, Tom.
Yeah, looking forward. This will be fun. It's fun to talk about this stuff. The
Great.
metaverse and the book, all that, all about it. Yep.
Okay. So you came to my attention while I was in the metaverse. In the last couple of years, I've done some deep dives in virtual reality using my Quest headset, and I got to know a group of people that directed me your way. Now, oddly, when I started messing around in another platform called Engage, I stumbled across you quite by accident because I was interested in another project you're working on. But before we get there, let's talk about Murder in the Metaverse, because I'm very curious based on conversations that we've had through back and forth emails. I want to know, what was the creative spark to even create that book?
Yeah. There's so many angles in, trying to talk about your book, but when you say the creative spark, it is really kind of clear. It's the title. I had an idea, Murder in the Metaverse. It just sort of came to me as something I could write. There had to be preconditions. I had to be at a point in my life where I had the time to write it. I was also kind of jealous of all my friends who during the pandemic wrote books, so there was a lot going inside me. And then I got that just Murder in the Metaverse. It just sounded so wonderful. I wondered if I could then come up with a story that would be, good enough for that title.
Thank you, because that speaks to the inspiration that even moved you in that direction. You mentioned to me when we were talking in emails that there was the possibility that you were going to try to reshape that work.
Yeah.
Are you still doing that?
Well, as I said, my hope was, first of all, to actually write my first ever story. I've never done this before. And then to have it be really about murder in the metaverse. And since I thought it was a cool title, would it be good enough? So I don't think it is. I don't really feel like I have lived up to the title, to tell the truth. I think it's pretty good for a first book. I'm really happy with it, actually. But I do want to do two things. It has a completely clear ending, but a lot of the characters and the situations are still going. It doesn't wrap things up in a nice bow. So I am actually very close to finishing a continuation of Murder in the Metaverse that I actually call Murder in the Meditation. And then we'll see. We'll see what happens after I finish that, whether I want to go back and kind of upgrade the first one or kind of something else. So, but I'm still exploring the same characters and settings and stuff like that.
You've said in the synopsis of the book that it's a little science fiction and it's a little politics. When you do the extension of this story, when you decide to move it forward, is it still going to be centered around those themes, or are you going to go are you thinking of another new direction?
Yeah, I am. And it actually goes to where I ran into you. Another thing that I'm working on has to do with the structure of the brain, neurostructures, and how that affects its operation and how that affects the way we create our own realities. And so in the second book, I do it. A lot of the action happens inside the brain. And I'm trying to understand more about the brain myself by writing stories in which that's the environment. But when I say political, I don't mean like current politics. I just mean kind of the eternal issues of authority versus more independent-minded people and stuff like that.
Makes sense.
I think that's what I'm always going to be, writing about. Whether this first thing that I wrote might be set in the near future. Maybe I don't really specify in the book, but maybe 20, 30 years. It's a recognizable future. And I like write. A lot of people write in that time frame. And I think I'll keep doing that. We'll see. Another, I guess I'll say one more thing quick about the creative spark, which is that so many things set in that time frame are dystopian. They're just grim and awful. And I don't go around with rosy colored glasses. I can imagine a lot of grim scenarios that we could be facing, but I don't think it's inevitable. And so I like to write, the story that I set there isn't everything all working out great, but suggests the possibilities of a non-dystopian future, at least in the shape of what it could be. And that's what I really want to do the most of. Just spin stories where things are in the process of working out.
You actually answered my next question in that statement, because I was interested in what set your voice apart in your writing style from other authors who sort of write about that particular science fiction or that vast infiniverse or metaverse angle.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is what sets you apart in the way that you look at this is that it is not a dystopian future that you're writing for.
Not inevitably, and not. I think I think in a way maybe we have a responsibility to tell stories where things could work out or show the process of things working out in what I would consider to be a humane way that respects individuals. And and I'm not saying that lots of other people don't write that way too, but I would say, yeah, even, Neil Stevenson and Snow Crash, which is in some ways the granddaddy of all that kind of stuff. And then, William Gibson, of course, maybe the two of them are both, they're both dark, big, unseen, invisible powers are always just running everything. And if you want to have any independence and freedom, you got to sneak around or else you'll get smashed, kind of thing. That's what tends to happen. And maybe they're right, but maybe it doesn't have to be that way. So,
what a refreshing take! It also speaks to what message did you really want to convey when you wrote this book, and when you think about your next book, what's the one thing that you want to get across with these writings?
Yeah. Doing something with groups of people can make a difference. There it is. There's a bumper sticker, right? I didn't thought of that really before, but and that's it. And I've seen that in my life. That's what I've also tried to do, and I honestly wouldn't say I've been overly successful. Most of the things I've tried to do to help influence things according to the values that I hold haven't always gone that way,
but the effort has always been there.
Well, and just the experience of doing it, I guess, is part of what I think life is about. The relationships that I've made along the way, the being sad, the being happy, all those things. That's what the fullness of life is. So that's. I'd like to be able to write that way. Again, there's one. It's not well known. There is a book. It's called "The Dandelion Insurrection," and it's one of the few books that I know that kind of also it doesn't paint the picture, and it's almost like a parable. It's not like brutally realistic, but it also shows things working out because of a few individuals working in concert and understanding that all of us, no matter what categories we try to put each other in, we're just humans. We have a mother and a father, and we're just trying to get on in our life, kind of thing. And some guy's able to tap into that and write a good story about it. So I'm not the only one that's written positive possible outcomes. Read Dandelion Insurrection. It should be better known, I think. So, and
thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah.
I visited outside of Africa VR, which I will get to. I visited a class that you were teaching.
Yeah.
And it harkened me back to, gosh, I never think I'd use that word harken, but it took me back to, it took me back to thinking about the impact that you want to have as a writer or being sort of a mentor in the things that you teach and share through virtual reality or in your conversations. Is that a big part of what you see yourself doing in the future as you create these works?
Yeah, call us Cassie, what I should call you. Yes and no. I mean, I honestly, everything I do is a way for me to help learn it more, right? So, what you came to, there's a brilliant psychiatrist, neurophysiologist named Ian McGilchrist, who wrote a very influential book just a couple of years ago called The Matter with Things. And what he does is pulls together a whole lot of the research on the fact that our brain has a left and a right. It's lateralized, and there's simplistic pop understandings of that, but there's also deep meaning to it. It's not an accident. Only vertebrates have two hemispheres. It obviously speaks to specialization. There's so much to go on, and you sort of handle that, and you sort of handle this. But they both, like in a good relationship, you're both in it also together. It's a very nuanced type of thing. So for me to just read it was one thing. To be able to try to, yes, teach it. I won't quibble with you saying teaching, but what I'm really trying to do is get a dialogue going to try to get people to relate it to their life and get discussions going. That's a little difficult because I think in some ways we're maybe brainwashed into thinking that we really wouldn't be able to understand brain stuff. That's brain surgery kind of thing. Who am I to comment on that? I don't agree with that perspective, but anyway, I'm trying to teach and lead discussions on, and I'm following just right through the text of this book. But it gets to your point though too. So I kind of want a world in which we learn together, learn truthfully who we are, and talk about things not generally talked about. And I've been able to do that a lot. I don't know if you want to get to it or not, or if you're aware. For over about 4.5 years now, I've hosted two other regular events, and the brain work has been going on for a number of months for over.
Yeah, please share more.
Yeah, well, I host a show called Death Q&A, and another event called Saying Goodbye. So they're on death and loss. And way back at the beginning of the pandemic, I just realized, death was going to be in people's face a lot more than usual. And, people would react to it in different ways. Maybe some people would like to, because VR was starting to take off, people couldn't get out of their house. Maybe they'd want to talk about it in VR. Well, they have. Every Tuesday, over 200 events I've now held where people can just come in and talk about death. It's okay to talk about death there. There is the side of trying to be helpful, but I wasn't so much trying to be helpful as I kind of wanted to have that experience, and what I've been able to get my arms around in terms of the thoughts and the experiences people have had and what people are holding inside them about death. It's just been unbelievable to just hear them and let them say it. And then similarly with loss, the Saying Goodbye event, the processing of loss is a lot more lengthy and layered than we're given credit for, but you don't get a lot of help after the first, short beginnings of it. So again, a place where you can just speak about what you've lost and where you
fantastic.
are.
Where do you host this event?
They're both in VR chat now. They started in Altspace, of course, at the beginning of the pandemic. And back then there was, it was kind of what I would call the perfect size crowd for something like that. There was 25 or 30 people coming every single week, all over the place, young and old and south and north and red states, blue states. The stories we heard was just unbelievable.
That's a fantastic gathering.
It is, and it still is. It's tapered off now. The immediacy of, especially the death anxieties, aren't quite as present as they were. I think they actually are, but not in the popular mind anyway. But it's still, people come still every week. Some people who are kind of regulars, they just kind of like having a place where it's okay to talk about death, and then a couple new people find it. VR chat isn't as good for discovering as Altspace was, but there, because that's where you got to go, is VR chat now. And so Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock Pacific is, I call it Death Q&A.
And is this something you can access through a computer feed or a computer connection?
Unfortunately, I was a big Altspace fan. We don't have to go into a big Altspace thing. And I do use Engage a fair amount. There's some issues I have with Engage also. But in VR chat, there's a lot of things I don't like about it. And it's not that easy to do on a computer. And it's not that easy to do in mobile. You really, not only do you want to be in a Quest, VR chat really wants you to be in a high end Quest, like a PC VCR or something like that,
Wow.
because there's things you just can't quite see how groovy it is, unless you have that kind of computing power. And that to me is a little bit limiting.
So it's not meeting the customer or the marketplace yet where it's at. They want the market to come to them.
That and in terms of the metaverse, the current existing, if you want to call it fully immersive version of the metaverse, VR, they're the king by far. I mean, they have 2 orders of magnitude more regular users than Altspace ever did. It's a huge numbers of people, so there is that reality. And I don't know what the future will hold for it. Frankly, we won't go into a long metaverse talk, but I'm kind of disappointed in the sense that I thought back there in 20 and 21, when it was serving a real need for a lot of people who were confined, and lots of people were coming together and doing things. I kind of thought that would be a solid foundation that the social aspects of VR would continue to grow from. It hasn't gone that way.
It has not, because
No.
that's how I got into it. I'm one of the few people that fell into it because of the health issues that I have and the mobility issues that I have.
See.
It was the perfect way to continue to engage with other humans, other people, get out and do things and still feel like you were connecting with the rest of the world. So it served that purpose for me, but I noticed I'm sort of in a circular group of people, not necessarily an echo chamber, but it's the same group no matter what platform I'm on. I'm engaging with a known group, a connected group of friends.
Yeah.
And that leads me to, along with the creation of that, I met Diana in Women of Workrooms, which oddly led me to Engage, which led to Africa VR. Could you talk a little bit about that project and your connection to it?
Yeah. It's just one of the great stories in my life, and it also says something about the way that social VR really brings the world together and can create really intimate relationships. I actually met Paul at the in 2020 around the and now I'm not being able to think of his name. I'm having a name not coming at the right time. The guy who was killed there in the spring of 2020 by killed by cop there in Minnesota, in Minneapolis. It's a terrible thing. There have been so much violence between citizens and law enforcement that I'm not being able to think of this man's name. But it was a worldwide event. It was in 2020. A shame that I'm not thinking of his name. Recorded forever, but there we go. It says something about it. But we were having a meeting just where people could come and talk about it and just say their feelings. We're going to get their feelings out. And Paul, who lives in outside of Nairobi, Kenya, by the way, for anyone listening, his name is Wayaki Wahinga, also Paul Simon, and several other variants depending on
It's a
affiliations
fantastic
and whatnot.
individual.
He sure is. He just strode right into this little sort of town hall meeting that we were having in VR in Altspace and said, "I'm from Africa and I want a seat at the table." And I was moderating the meeting. I do a lot of this kind of hosting. I love that. And I said, "Well, you are here. Go for it. Speak what." And he's started talking about how violence between law enforcement and citizens was a problem. Where he is too, and gave some specific examples, and then said he wanted to have an event that he could host on it too, and inform people about it. And he did. In the next few days, I helped him set up events in Altspace where then he hosted things and gave little workshops and what relations were like there. But that's not the center of who Paul is. That was the issue that connected us deeply. I mean, as soon as we met, we just hit it off. He got his Zoom and took me with a camera into his house and met Diana and met Israel, his son. And it was one of those special bonding sort of things. And he's a long time grassroots help other people sort of person. He's had a charity in Nairobi for a long time called BOFSN. It helps families with children in need. To give you one example, and for anyone listening, this is something, if you haven't been around the world very much, you wouldn't know that if you don't have a lot of money and your child has to be hospitalized for any purpose, to get that child out when they're all better, you have to pay the bill. And if
I
you can't
didn't
pay the
know
bill,
that.
you don't get the child out. This happens all over the world. It's unbelievable. Um, and there are some hospitals that won't let you in until you pay the money, but poor people go to the ones where they let you in and then you've got to pay the money. And one of the things that Paul's charity does is raise money to get children out of hospitals. That's just an example. It's a different kind of, it's a kind of an ad hoc charity. But when VR came, it also just hit him, he's always been a technology oriented guy. And he just realized this was the tool he'd been looking for, to be able to give young people in Africa a platform where they could learn how to present themselves, how to set up meetings, how to present their lives, tell their stories around the world to the metaverse. That was always his goal. And now he's been doing that. He calls his organization Africa VR Campus and Center. And he has a cohort mostly of young women now. Each one of their stories is unbelievable. It's not,
Unbelievable.
yeah, he's not an NGO funded thing associated with an established institution or something like that.
Correct.
Everybody that joins him is just a regular old working family, and regular old working family is pretty what we would call below the poverty line, probably in North America, where the way folks live. But for one reason or another, they saw this opportunity and seized it. And they get together, sometimes it's as much as once a week, once every 2 weeks. There's been problems in Kenya. There's been floods. There's been, of course, the civil, disturbances there. So
Yeah, he covers a lot of that when he talks about bringing the girls and then the inability to bring the girls because of civil outbreaks,
yes,
and how it affects their travel to and from where they use these technology devices. I've learned so much in the short time I've been engaging with Africa VR,
yeah,
but I noticed your name and your photo is always prevalent in the
yeah.
space when I come in.
Yeah, I was an early supporter. I'm on the board. I'm not a super wealthy person, but I have enough that I've been able to put a little bit of money to. A little bit of money goes a long way.
That's
Within
fantastic.
you pay you use the PayPal, like africavr.org. That's it. Easy to remember. AfricaVR, one word.org. You go there. There's a little PayPal thing. You give him a couple $100. Oh man, that just funded a month of operation right there. But what he has a car. We just think of that as a normal thing. That makes him the special guy. He lives in a village really outside of Nairobi, and if anyone needs to go anywhere, Paul drives them, and he drives all around to pick up the girls. And there are some young men too. They're I should also have said they're high school age or just past high school age now. And they really have metaverse skills. It gets back to the book again. I mean, to you and I, the metaverse is a palpable living thing where we have friends. I wake up in the morning and I think about my friends, and I think about Paul. He's
Absolutely.
as real to me as someone who lives in my town
Exactly.
here. And the young women, I've gotten to know some of them. Some of them have been with this program for 2 years now, and I've met with them in VR locations and hung out with them. They met with me on my birthday and sang happy birthday to me. Holy smokes. You need windshield wipers on your headset for that. Man. Yeah.
The friends you make in your headset, your virtual lifestyle, really does count as some solid friendships because they are as consistent and present in your life as the people that you may lay eyes on or lay hands on, encounter in your day-to-day life. At least that's the way it was for me.
Yeah, no, it is. And actually, I can bring this a little bit full circle. I'm not paying any attention to time. I'll just leave that up to you. But
We've got a couple of more minutes where we can
okay.
continue to talk
Yeah.
about this.
Well, right now in the present moment, Africa is the future. Africa is the youngest continent by far. Africa is immense. People don't quite get this. Africa is bigger than North America and South America and the Europe part of Eurasia all put together. That's how big Africa is. But its age demographic, and also for the way it's been exploited, it still has unbelievable amounts of commodities that are important and valuable. So there's a new scramble for Africa going on, obviously. And our hope is that Africa gets to take advantage of that African stuff, that 80% of the value of what comes in Africa doesn't get ripped off by re-exporters and retailers and whatnot. And it's really empowering young people for the future that you and I are a little bit disappointed that it hasn't shown up sooner than it has, but it's going to happen. It just is,
It's gonna
you
happen,
know?
and you hear the determination from
Yeah.
each of the young girls as they talk about the impact of having that technology at their disposal and how they wanna maximize it in the future. I thank you so much for highlighting those spaces because they've made a huge impact on me, and I encourage people, if you should ever find yourself with an opportunity to visit any of these spaces, please do so. I have a couple of more questions for you,
Go
Tom,
for it.
before I
Sure.
let you go. Um, one of the things that I wanted to know is what is your dream project with all the things that you're working on? Do you have a dream project that you're working on coming up?
Well, I'm at a fortunate point in my life. I didn't my stock phrase. I call myself uh, post semi old and post career. Uh,
I saw that.
yeah, and so semi old people don't quite know what that means, and I'm post career, so I don't like the normal terms because people bring their own baggage to that. But for myself, I'm in that point of life, but I still got a lot of energy, and drive. So, and instead of I tend to, people say, "Oh, I'm juggling so many things." I think you got to be careful of the metaphors you use. Juggling is very stressful, and if you take off your attention for a second, everything breaks, right? So my operative metaphor is that I have kind of a salad bar. I have a number of projects. Only projects that I love are what I let in now because I'm post career. When you're career, you got to say yes to things you don't want to. That's too bad. That's what career is. I did that for 45 years, and but now, so I have a salad bar of dream projects, I would say, and I go around between them. One that I in alt space, I do something in the metaverse a lot of people don't do, which is I like to bring in media assets that are photorealistic. Very quickly, I'll
Okay.
just say, for instance, the Google Street View database, where those Google cars have gone up and down every street in the world, taken high resolution 360-degree
Yes,
everywhere. Well, I can bring those into VR and create a world. The skybox can be that place in London where Banksy did that graffiti, and then you can like look at that graffiti and feel you're there in London looking at it, right?
I have a Banksy knockoff right on my wall over there.
Well, that's why I said Banksy, because street art in general is one of the areas that I'm just drawn to, uh,
Yeah,
because it has the full gamut of it's both exploitive and commercial, but it's also marginalized people. It's also violent and independent and sellout. I mean, everything you want to throw at it. It's all those things, but it really engages people, and everyone's not going to be able to go to all the places in the world where all the amazing street art is, but I can bring it alive. And a lot of the street art, I have about 30 Banksies right now that don't exist in the physical world anymore. They've been painted over, they're gone. So VR isn't the second best. It's like if you want to see it in its context, it's the only way to do it.
it's
Um,
yes.
and I could do it easily in alt space, but there was limitations, and I've bitten the bullet. At my semi-old age, I've learned Unity, the 3D modeling package that underlies most gaming and all the worlds in VR chat, and I'm kind of
Oh, I hear
building
so much
worlds.
about unity. I think that's
Yeah.
going to have to be a horizon I conquer.
I've just gone over that horizon just in the past few days. I can now sit back and I actually just created a world yesterday where the skybox is a particular Banksy, and then I've got a bunch of smaller, they call it photospheres, where you step inside it and you're able to just walk right up to it and see the detail a little bit more. So it's like a Banksy exhibit. But every one you step into, you feel now I'm in London, now I'm in Bristol, now I'm in the one he did in Milan, and whatnot.
Oh,
And
this is so
so
fascinating.
yeah, so in this
I'm
respect,
really looking forward to you putting that together.
well, I'll just close on that one by saying that I do Banksy because he's such a draw. Banksy actually isn't the best VR street artist because Banksy is detailed and conceptual. And what's great about Banksy is the audacity that he actually did that thing.
Yes.
Um, so seeing it in VR isn't quite as amazing. But Banksy and others have spawned the generation of very emotionally expressive street artists. A lot of them are women, but there's also plenty of men that do gigantic 6-story murals. and the expressions and the human feelings that they're able to put into those things are just mind blowing. And those work very well in VR. And that's what I'll be turning my attention to after I get a little Banksy thing to draw people in. So yeah, I got my street art work going. Are you familiar with the I Ching at all? Do you know what that
No,
is?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, I'm working with a friend. To your point about we get entrenched in our communities, I'm that way to some extent, but I've maybe because I'm kind of older and a little bit different, people actually ask me to come into their communities and do things. So I got my foot in a few places, and I'm working with some people there to make a world where we will be, I'll just say, able to on live consult a very ancient Chinese book of wisdom called the I Ching, the Book of Changes. All there is change. No change is good or bad. What helps is to know what kind of change you're in right now and what do you do during that type of change. That's what the I Ching is about. So I'm working with someone. That's another one of my current projects. So there's a little bit of rambling for you.
Wow. I
Metaverse.
just want to thank you for this metaverse conversation. It appears we're on the same page as we look at this landscape and its potential, what we thought it was going to be, what it actually is, and what we
Always
hope
takes
it will
longer.
be.
Yeah.
But I do want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for the writing that you've done. I look forward to more. And I'm sure I'll be engaging with you again in the future inside the metaverse where our headsets meet up and we engage, because that's the platform right now where I'm meeting you all the time.
Okay.
And I just want to close by saying, your career at WGBH TV has served you well.
No,
You're a fascinating speaker, and I have thoroughly enjoyed having you here. And I hope you'll come back again in the future
yeah.
and share more about the things that you're working on.
Well, thanks for the talk. It was fun. And I hope to see you around the metaverse, as they say.
Thank you. And the book club thanks you. And hopefully, again, the book is called Murder in the Metaverse. It's available on Amazon. And you can find Tom Nickel, PhD, on several of these wonderful platforms we've talked about. Have a great weekend, Tom. And to all my visitors, please come back. We have so much more awaiting you and great books and great conversations. Bye-bye, Tom.
Great idea for a podcast. Glad you tapped me, and to be continued. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.